Now here is a refinement of practice that you can gain insight into, which is everyone knows the causality of physical acts. In fact, we have physics. So I'm holding this ball. If I release this ball, it will fall at us with a certain velocity to the earth. Was it 9.76 meters a second? We know this down. We've got this really down to a science. And then you can see a certain fatalism in the causality of, for example, doing unskillful things and doing skillful things and the results thereof. But the higher refinement is think of thinking as an act. Thinking is an act. So if you start thinking bad thoughts, how far away is that from bad deeds? Or even if you don't do bad deeds, just the thinking of the bad thoughts are punishment enough. You're generating dissatisfaction on the basis of your thoughts, and the thoughts are volitional. You see that refinement? If you can get to that level and stop seeing yourself as some type of pre-programmed automation, and in a certain sense it's true, if we come back to the conditionality again, but in a certain sense it's not true in that you can exercise optionality, especially when you become aware that you're engaging in some type of unwholesome thought. See, the thought itself, the memory of something, or just an emotion, anger, there it is. It's like having a cramp. You then say, all right, because I'm a compassionate person, I'm not just going to pretend it doesn't exist. I'm going to address the problem. Have you ever had a cramp in your foot and you just said, all right, wait a second, sit down real quick, and then if you get it in the beginning, it doesn't turn into something extremely painful because your whole body starts cramping. Like it can go from your foot all the way up your calf, and then it can just lock like that, and your body is just ripping you a new one for unknown reasons. But if you sit down, if you've had one of those, but if you're experienced like that and you sit down real quick when you feel it coming on and you massage your calf real quick or your foot, or you put your foot into, you start stretching your foot in a certain way that keeps it from locking on and locking up. That's the way you need to think of cognition and your thoughts as well. It's not just monitoring the thoughts, it's letting thoughts go and guiding thoughts. And the wholesome thoughts you have, the good thoughts you have, you're going to have the good results of that too. Here I am thinking of joy. Here I am thinking of gratitude, and here I'm doing it on purpose. It's not that it just didn't come out of the void. It's something that you can come back to, like, well, let me think instead of all of the dissecting all of the negative things into minutia. Because that's vicariously interacting with these unwholesome thoughts, even if you're doing it in a scientific way. It's like dissecting a frog. Why do you need to be dissecting frogs? Just because they jump at you. Dodge them instead. Right? And even if they bump you, they bump off you. You don't have to dissect it. You don't have to interact with it just because it bumped you. It bumps you, it bumps off you. No harm done. And so think of your thoughts that way, the ones that are unwholesome or the ones that are agitating you. Just agitating, any type of agitation. It doesn't have to be an extreme thought. Could be just a low worry about something. There's so many people that revert to just low worries. Their whole lives are full of low worries. Oh, do I have enough of this? Am I going to run out of bread tomorrow? Did I buy my ticket for this? Or did I how are my shoes looking? Are my shoes, does my shoes have a hole in them? And they just go from one potentially aggravating thing to the next. Now, for some people, it just seems to be their natural, again, normal, vulgar, common selves. So it's not like you're going to be able to rip them out of their universe with your observations. Okay? It's, your words bounce off these people like rain off of a buoy. But as far as your words go, also good words, right? Good words, good thoughts, good deeds. It's all three. All three are required, not just for mental hygiene, but mental health, healthy, spiritual side of things, religiously investing in the spiritual side of things, that there's not just not defilements there, but it's healthy and flourishing. Right, just like a garden, there's a lot of good things growing in it. You got the tomatoes are looking good, although a couple of leaves are a little bit bitten up, but that doesn't matter. And the parsley is just exploding. Then the potatoes are looking great, but there's a couple of them that, because of where they're positioned, are a little bit stunted. But the total yield is just unbelievably satisfying, or good enough. So much good, wholesome energy contained in all those tubers. And where did they come from? Did you make them grow, or did you just help the process along? Could you just snap your fingers and have all of that there? Or did it take time? Did it take cultivation? Did it take right effort? Did it take patience? Did it take, finally, compassion and generosity? See, we think these two things don't exist in any equation. We're always forgetting them. But those are the things that make it all happen, make it all grow in the first place. They're the higher level ingredients needed. You don't have them, it doesn't happen. It remains a desert. It remains a barren field. It remains full of thorns. Remains full of nothing, full of vulgarity, full of whatever just happened to grow there, and not all of it's good. I mean, it's good for itself, it's its own little life form in a way, but as far as its interaction with you, it's nothing special about it. It's really normal. But the garden of your mind, it should be abundant with good things. And so look into the causality of your thoughts. These thoughts, you have bad thoughts, right there, you're going to have bad results based on that. Immediate bad results. And the longer you're locked in, the worse it gets. And it can get even more worse, or worse than that, because it can snowball. So it really does behoove one to religiously check and religiously cultivate. Not just removing the bad, but nourishing the good. Simplifying things, you can just see it as deep operations in the information sphere. So how do you get the journalists? Well, you get them in college. You mess up their brains and inject them with a false ideology that is Leninist in origin. They can update those types of games like viruses. They can make it more efficacious. And the people that come out of these institutions, well, the institutions are set up to receive their people from these institutions. They assume they do the vetting, but they're vetting for toxicity, for undermining ideologies, decapitation, subversion, and ultimately destruction of infrastructure, social infrastructure, economic and political infrastructure, and everything else. That will then allow them to have carte blanche impunity in the world. That is their method, and that is their motive. So now you just think of the thousands of victims that type of passive violence, passive aggressive violence that you can implement. Well, how can you implement it? Well, you need to have a cover, which means you need to have plausible deniability. That's it. And so you just have a succession of bad ideas. Like, oh no, you shouldn't be against foreign people being here because foreign people are all good, and the foreign people they're bringing in aren't good at all. But, a normal person would have been able to categorize that, but the people that have been educated, they don't see anything wrong with that. In fact, people that see something wrong with that, they're the problem. Think about that. So it's like, teaching people, broken fences are good and mending fences is bad. And there's fence menders, and they're the ones that you should be very suspect about because they're evil. That's the story. Now, just think about it. You have two prisons. They've imprisoned you without letting you know you're in prison by just feeding you the wrong information. And if you want to see the extremity with which information activities can go, they had a Chinese opera singer recently in the bombed out Maripol Theater, and she was just telling a straight up lie. As a mother of two children, she was happy to sing the praises of the liberation of the building that got cleaned of Nazis. So just the straight up state misrepresentation of that, the official story. And she was singing and everything, saying that story in Chinese on their main network. So just think about the unethicalness of that, lying about mass murder. They said there were 600 Ukrainians sheltering there when they blew it up. Families, they put paint on the outside children and they wrote it so you could see it from the air. That's why they targeted it. So think of the symbolic representation of blowing up a famous theater like that. And then flying in an opera singer to tell a complete lie, fabrication. Who do you think's interested in that area, maybe? And if they didn't see any credible deterrence, why wouldn't they go in there for any type of different pretext, even if it was a Russian pretext or the appearance of one? They just came up with a stupid story. Like, they are bad people, let's go attack them. And then they threw the whole mythology of the Second World War behind that. This is the Great Patriotic War. Like trying to make a false equivalency of that magnitude. But you see, in their information bubbles, that they determine what history is, and so they're the ones coming up with that incongruence with the real thing. And so you have to then try to come to grips with what you're dealing with in the form of an official entity that would not only be capable of doing something like that, but doing it on an organized level, professional level, historical level. If they can determine the narrative finally, that's what it will be. Complete fabrication, an inversion of reality, an alternative reality. A good alternative reality for them, a bad alternative reality for everyone else. So they consider that politics, like political history. See, this is as far as Leninists go. So of course, to have political history, you need political historians, which means you need academies of stainless steel polished human torpedoes that will convincingly transmit the false message, such as exterminationism. That was certainly done in the United States. Best professionals in the business went there and told people to do the exact opposite of what they should do for moral reasons. Just imagine just the level of contempt someone would have to do something like that. But they have it in spades where they're from. Because that's part of their martial culture is let's just chop whatever heads we can. Especially if it doesn't cost us anything. We just have to be, deceptive. That's it. Since when has that stopped criminals ever? Oh, I just have to be deceptive and I can make off with this other guy's stuff. Sure, they do it. So now you're talking about professional criminals that would deny themselves the prerogative to commit criminal acts. It's a whole different clientele. It's not church-going people that are doing this. So they demand a certain amount of reciprocity that they themselves do not deliver on the most basic of standard civil societal expectations. Not a single solitary one. Which is say they're poison, pure poison. Every part of their presence anywhere amongst us is pure poison. What are they doing amongst us? Pure poison. They have weakened us with pure poison, and now they're just exploiting the gap. And to do that, they needed to make psychological preparations. So they took out all of the thinkers, all of the people that could put two and two together, and then they just came up with narratives. That's it. Stuck to it. Organized way. How did they get there? Yeah, capital capture. Malign capital placed in ownership structures, change out the management, and all of a sudden you've got the narrative straight out of some Shanghai. And it's not the unsophisticated kind, it's oddly enough the sophisticated kind, because for them it's a strategic thing. Weaken the enemy, weaken the competition, no matter what, no matter how. That's it. That was their strategy, that was their implementation, and it's still amongst us. It's in the air like a stinky emission of one's gastrointestinal tract. It's the smell of bacteria, isn't it? But bacteria amongst us, they don't tolerate that bacteria amongst them. Which is funny when you start looking at incongruencies, like what they themselves censor out of their societies. You would have to think, why would they do that? Now, some of it, of course, is self-serving, but some of it is just socially injurious, which is to say their blowback from their own operations. They don't want that in their neighborhood. They want it in your neighborhood. See, what they censor amongst themselves, they spread amongst others that they don't like. And maybe you haven't been paying attention, but there's a lot of people that don't like them, and they don't like for good reason. But you don't know there's good reasons because you've been hearing a smoke show your whole life that they're the up and coming and they've reformed themselves and they're quite different than when they ran over their own people en masse with tanks, but they're not. Not in the least slightest degree. That was just a line of blarney that you bought to some degree because you trusted your news sources, because they had some type of brand, some type of credibility from the past that made the deception that much more plausible. They didn't come out, with something new. They went after the big brands and they paid the big bucks. And they got them, which meant they got access to the information sphere, which means that they gained access to the ability to cripple one strategically, which is also a leadership factor. You have broken leadership, selective mechanisms, which are manifest in our time. That's an indication of that. Then, of course, the causality of that is garbage in, garbage out, right? So imagine that was working in their system, but our system was, we had a functioning one, like a really excellent one, that didn't weed out the good people like we have now, but actually identified good people that might not be so easy to spot. Whereas their polished people, their chrome torpedoes, they don't make it in even close, because they all blow up because they're not very innovative. When you come back down to it, they're programmed in a wrong way. They're suicide drones. See, useful idiots, that's sort of, again, euphemism. These people are really active in messing up other people's lives in a variety of creative ways. Especially if they're given the moral impunity to do that, at least on a psychological level. No, you've been victimized throughout the centuries, so these are the enemy. It happens to be the man, the head of the family, the patriarch, the mayor of the city, the Lord Chancellor. Isn't that odd? Those were the people that were the defenders of the nation and civilization itself. They turned them against them, their own heroes. So then you have to think of the demented Buddhists that you need to bring in that can pull off that farce over time in sneering, sarcastic, and perverted ways. So that at least some type of smoke show is going in these brands, the information spheres, to just keep these people going until they're pushed off a cliff one way or another, economic, socioeconomic, or politically. Or a brick just gets smashed against their head. So they're going to a vetted venue. And it turns out there were like gangs of predators just positioned all around the place, like in many universities in these urban areas, post-security. Oh no, just 500 students a year got brained. And you're supposed to have professors there, scientists, people that can put two and two together. Oh no, we don't talk about that. We've got some type of superior. Our superiors know why that's necessary. We stopped asking questions about that. Oh, but yeah, tuition just keeps going up real high. So once you graduate, if you happen to get married and you get saddled with a 30-year mortgage, congratulations, you're a slave. So that 40-hour work week, you might have to put in 50 and 60 just to keep a job in a corporate environment that gets increasingly politicized. You say a wrong joke to a wrong person, feels offended, fired. How fast are you bankrupt if you've got a mortgage, a wife and kids, and everything else? This is the level of sadism these capitalists applied to entire generations of men after they captured the political side of things via what? Some type of racket. Unknown people of unknown wealth from unknown origin, just picking who gets to become what, where, even though they have no capacity to do that, no higher capacity, just had the impunity to take over something stupid that people didn't realize was no longer working just because they had some side benefit off of that, whereas everybody else got tanked. Now, of course, we have all of these assumptions that, the brave journalist or investigator or detective, he's going to make that publicly known. And then everything will be all right in Smithville. But that doesn't happen all the time. And when it doesn't, it's a nightmare. I mean, the 30 years of banditry, that's putting it mildly. There's a whole depth to that is indescribably horrific. If you are a civilized person and not a damn barbarian, the people who not just allowed it to happen, but had a hand in it. And there was a bunch of hands and feet, you would have to think, for the results that are, if you go looking for them, are easily discoverable. You don't think there's causality between mass anarchy and mass criminality? It's the white collar kind. It's the kind that gives you just a little bit of a reason to doubt that these people do have it in on for you. It's not just that you think that they might be. But the truth is, they have it in on themselves. People that betray and their own heroes, they're not going any place good. I mean, they're going to perdition for sure. And certainly in this life too. It's not just after this life. No, rest assured. The worst of these people, they go completely bonkers by the time they can, and they're doing it for years and years and years, because that is their punishment. It's not just a physical punishment, it's especially a spiritual and psychological punishment. And it's not because anybody wanted them to take the wrong path. They chose it. It's their karma. It's the causality behind it. That's why it's so fearsome. That is why the virtues are so important. It's very, very, very simple in many ways. It's just our rational thinking minds will make it complicated. But you see, that's moral mind. You keep things simple, you keep the virtues, you will get reflection. And with reflection, you will get wisdom. And wisdom is worth everything in the world, more than it. Because it's not just this life, but this life, it's a reward you can't demand. It's its own reward. But you have to have faith and believe that it is so. If you don't, what is it to you? Just a closed door. And so the door will remain closed. But if you open it, the right door, you go through the door of wisdom, you will eat of its fruit. Quick take on the UK's economy. 13 years into a fake conservative government. So again, fake conservative. These are people who think they reinvented the term conservative to just be greedy. Oh, it's about the economy, we're going to make money. Well, it turns out their economy only profits 5% of the population. It's a 95-5 operation economy. So it's funny, it's sort of like online dating. 95% of the dudes get nothing. But, that 5%, they are very invested in the representing the legitimacy of the system and certainly sweet-talking their their voters into believing in what they believe, which is a great future because they also got a lot of investments because they get kicks on the investment side. They get the inside scoop on what their portfolio should look like. So what they're bringing in is above market. Maybe they're pulling 25%, maybe more. With tips, but again, that's that 5% just is in the clover. So they're really convinced that their way of doing things should continue, despite there being some rumblings amongst the people that like make stuff happen and go, and fuel truck drivers, small and medium-sized businesses, people that get up and have to work for a living type people, those people, they don't matter really. They've always been around. And of course, people at the top have always been around, and they've always known exactly what to say and what not to say. And they have a whole list of things, a whole minefield of terms that they need to avoid, and another minefield of terms that they need to use. And they read their little crappy information bubble, putrefied, inverted flip little information sources that tell them the right way of thinking. This is the right way this month is. You need to be this type of radicalized wrong on these issues, and these are the boogeymen. Step out of line, you fall out of the 5% of profiteers, people selling the country down the river. Just realize that 5%, just think, those are the people that don't care, right? Imagine, you negatively select with your population so that the 5% of people that don't care, they profit. Everybody else gets rugged. Then you pre-select for them with inverted moral paradigms. If they can get through those, then they'll basically say or do anything to stay in the 5% and throw anybody under the bus that might keep them from being there and staying there. So it's the same system as the Soviet Union. Like, think of all the Eastern European countries that got rolled over by 5%ers. They were the ones that took the deal with the military protection, occupation. What do I need to say? Okay. And they weren't too dewy in the leadership department. So that, again, is how you notice that this type of racket is actually the racket that is what it is. the racket in charge, the racket in play. Because they don't come up with any new ideas. They have more or less templates they work off of, like, carbon-free net zero. They have these terms that just beguile the common man or woman because they studied up on that. They have these lofty goals. But you don't know anything about that, so they must know what they're talking about. But net zero, it's a ridiculous idea. Imagine somebody coming out of university that read up on those books that somebody didn't read in, let's say, the aviation industry, and they say, you know what, we got billions of dollars for net zero. Well, here's this government money, and he's talking to an aviation engineer. Can you imagine the stupidity, the monstrous stupidity of that? But again, this pitter-patter, this keeping themselves in the know with this esoteric knowledge about radicalized climate theories, that's a way to line their pockets with consultancies and other in-the-know environmental advisory boards. So they might enrich their investments with one of those things as well. So, and then on top of that, look at this. These are regulators, right? This is the blob. So blob of regulators. They don't know the first or last thing about running a business, but they do know how to regulate things. So what has been the cumulative effect of that idiocy? Well, it's made the entire country unattractive for foreign investment. Too much regulation, like what? Like I got to do this, then this, then this, then this, then this. I got to pay that. Got to run here. What for? For a place with crappy weather and people that are permanently angry for good reason. What's the perk? Oh, you get to chill with the 5%ers in a couple of downtown rookie clubs that might have some perks. Who knows? Get to hit the golf course with a bunch of sellouts that think in globalized terms, in terms of globalized corporate culture, that could be thrown out on their ass for one wrong word. That type of situation. Who's in on that? Who thinks that's the best way to live? Well, if you do, there's a spot for you there. You can be a regulator regulating the regulations that regulated the economy into the ground. Because you know what the regulations are, you know how to regulate them, so that's why they need to hire you, so that they can run their business. But that's just the first disadvantage going into it. There's so many more. Because these type of people are now in the energy sector, so they like to raise prices just like that and call it inflation. And then all of a sudden their portfolios go up from 15% profit on passive investments to 20%, because they were big into energy. Or maybe it's the water network that goes up 50%. But the costs don't go up 50%. And the quality might go down 10%. Why not? Everybody needs to drink water, don't they? It's a racket. So you need to look at the regulations. It's not just inhibitive. It's not just sadistic for people and companies trapped in a regulatory environment. But it does end up tanking economies. But no matter what, the regulators will still be in some type of piranha tank, devouring whatever's left in a country, if you tolerate them in the halls of government. So now, am I calling that there be some type of violent removal of them? No, but they should be voted out. And this is the problem. The other party is even worse than the party that's in. So how do you turn that situation around? Well, my idea was a direct appeal to the king to dissolve both houses and start a national competition. Now, people might think that's loony, but that's why you have a king, don't you? The king decides. King is a man on earth. He's not a document that was written up hundreds of years ago that is in desperate need of revision. You set up an autonomous system and then let people game it over centuries. Why should you be surprised that it's defunct? It can happen, but just like a truck can be defunct, you can build a new truck. Get new drivers, right? Build a new garage. Get some new tools. Get some new technology. Do things a little bit differently. Learn from your mistakes. Evolve, innovate, change. They're expecting everything to just continue. In a lot of ways, I said it time and again, they're victims of their own success. They're succeeding but at the same time destroying more than they're worth, certainly. But again, 5%, rooking the 95%, that's right there. It's not equitable. It's not worth it for the majority of the people in the country. That's the That's what the computer typed out. Now, when 50-50 is the case, 50% profit, 50% don't, that's 50-50 system, isn't it? Now, ideally, I mean, you would think it's a utopian possibility. 100% of people would profit, but that's likely impossible. But how about 95% profit, 5% don't? Like, for example, the criminal class, they don't profit, but the 95% of other people do. How's that for a system? Or an economy, or any other abstract way of interacting with others? And this is the thing, these national governments, they're a good example of doing things the wrong way. You export that model to a global scale, it's still bad. In fact, it's even worse. You're just globalizing a 95 high model. And you're doing it in systems that require reciprocity to work. So does it lead to then authoritarianism, as they say? Like, just, all right, we're shutting this information sphere down with a feedback loop. It's not working for us. Where this is the right way, period. It's our way or the highway. Everybody shut up. Is that what they're going to do? Are they going to pull one of those? Maybe. Some of them are just straight up and down crazy. I mean, you wouldn't think you would be in your right mind to do something like that, but these people are, again, just more or less nihilists. They don't think in terms of the rightness or wrongness of rules. They just think in terms of rules. This is their exploit. You're in on the exploit, or you're out. They're in, you're out. So again, should it be tolerated on a social level? I don't think so. But thinking that things should be equitable when they're not is, you could think that way in a lot of different situations, couldn't you? I think I shouldn't be in a bad relationship. Well, can you end that relationship? Well, in the case of countries, it's a little bit more complicated than that. I mean, they would say, yeah, sure, just go somewhere else. Well, where are you going to go? Like, why should you go? Why shouldn't they go? Like, why don't you make them the same nice offer and see what they say? Like, if they get, like, offended about that, then it's like, well, why would you be offended if I told you that, but you recommended it to me? Like, what? But that's the basic non-reciprocity of the people you're dealing with. They're that dense. Like, they've thought up, you gotta think of them like bullies that thought up a bunch of pseudo-intellectual tricks of bullying, just like learning jargon, and you don't, so they can appear smart. But the other one is they'll accuse you directly of what you accuse them of, on purpose. And then also jump straight into alternative reality propaganda. You don't think it can happen? All of Russia has just done it. China has done it, is doing it. So we're talking the last 13 years in the UK. Have they done it? How long will they ride this until it's manifestly obvious that you're dealing with major issues, as they say? The discrediting and the malfunctioning of macroeconomic systems. Is that the uncharted waters that we're in at this point? Possibly. I mean, if this is the lead up to a world war, which is what it's looking like, they think they might pull it off in some type of Sovietized way. A lot of people think they can do a lot of things that then don't work out in the end. So just because this model has been persuasive for a certain amount of time doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. So keep things light, keep things flexible, keep things new. Because every day is a new day. Another aspect of the UK economy to take into account is this 13-year fake Conservative Party. They managed to get the UK out of the EU. Now think of the horrific political consequences of that if you think that the UK hasn't gone complete loony bird like Germany and France did. So what could have counterbalanced the loony birdness of France and Germany, which has just unbelievably bad governances? You can think in terms of Poland and UK could have perhaps counterbalanced that, but without the UK, you've got those two dummies plus Italy, which is compromised on multiple levels. And then what is the EU then? Well, then it's a much worse off entity. And of course, during the whole time, no business with the EU is for British businesses unless they get special stamps or who knows what. They got to bend backwards to get their goods in and out of the largest market in their direct vicinity. So, yeah, the idiot regulators, the malfeasant, misguided regulators that regulated that into existence, that reality, they're bad news. That's like an engineer that builds a bridge that disappears cars or whatever drives over it. Like 90% of the traffic flies off a cliff. That's the super specialized, complicated bridge that they took all the money and all the time of 13 years to build. And that's the results. And then they're scratching their heads. Their economy doesn't work. This was, if it wasn't set out as sabotage, it turned out to be sabotage. So then you got to think, what are the chances that somebody that were tasked with leadership would come up with such a cockamamie result that were truly trying to do their best? I mean, at some point, you begin to sense a certain amount of gullibility on behalf of a well-meaning public. And yet that's what these spectacular deceptions can pull off, apparently, the power of public relations. Beware of so-called hustle culture. You gotta look it up. See, back in the day, there was Hustler magazine, but now there's hustle culture. And it's weird because one of I forget his name right now, but he was like a little scrappy, get this, Belarusian dude, right? From Belarus. We know that place is cooked and has been for a while. Some people say they never came out of the Soviet Union. They stayed the Soviet Union even when Russia went through the noughties, as they say in the UK. They've also had a dictator there for decades. So that dude somehow just popped up in New York City with like a manipulative podcast promoting hustle culture, and that I think he was running some type of wine business. That was another thing. I wonder who his wine suppliers were, because that was the same deal that the oligarch in Montenegro got. So talk about being all in on business. That guy with the 95% disapproval rating. That had to flee the country. That type of guy, he had good wine contacts. That's part of his CV, was knowing some wine people before he became the billionaire that he was. So this little scrappy Belarusian dude, he flew under the radar and came out hard for hustle culture. Hustle culture is the easiest way to burn out and wreck your life. And there has been some people that did come back from that, and came back and also said, don't do it, like don't believe the hype. But this was after they ground themselves to dust for sometimes up to 5 years or more. just husks of human beings. And then you have to think, what that means for them. Like, and some people weren't able to switch out of that gear. And then imagine you're running into an economy that's failing, like COVID-19. How are you gonna, I mean, you need to shift gears, you need to do everything known to man to survive. Well, okay, guess what the survival rate is of that? Maybe 5%. Best case scenario. And that 5% that's left over, they're not happy-go-lucky people. They're people that not only grinded themselves way too hard for way too long, they have no empathy for anyone else. They're mean as snakes, or worse than snake. A snake is chill, man. Snakes are sometimes dangerous. I like meeting snakes in the forest. All kinds of different snakes. I am awed by snakes. Snakes are not grinding themselves. And some people say they're mean. They're not as mean as these people. These people are on a whole different level of mean. If you get one of these so-called damn hustlers as a boss, they're going to hustle your boots off. And here's the thing about hustling. A lot of people are hustling, but or also working hard as hell, but they're working for people that are pretty maniacal, and they're working on offbeat, misguided projects, putting in overtime for it so that they can claim they're a success story. Look at me, I'm on TV. I did every stupid thing I was asked, like some type of Manchurian candidate. And I say yes, please afterwards. That's why I'm the super employee of the week. Everybody knows who these people are. You want to be one of those? Well, again, we're talking about the distributions in a statistical way of population. You might get 5% of people that are going to go that way, because they're group oriented and the group has told them this is what success looks like, and they want to be the gosh darn best that they can be. Well, look, that's great when it's applied to the right activities. That's not so great when it's really applied to something pretty nonsensical and also has tremendously negative side effects as far as your real life goes. You know, the life outside of work, working all the time for basic things, not even basic. How about aggravating existence? Because you're running into people such as co-workers, bosses, clients, and employees, and then also civilians, people outside the working environment, that are all annoying as hell because they've been given an agitatory cultural program. So they see you as the problem when you show up. Before, they would have been happy to see you, or at least neutral. Now, they got some type of chip on their shoulder with really offbeat, strange takes on human nature and civilized society. I recommend on YouTube, there's now like documentaries coming out, like old film clips that have been color rendered. They look and motion corrected. They've used really high tech digital video editing software. These old films, they look great. They look amazing. They look better than they did when I saw them in their original formats. That's what I'm talking about. And there's one out now, New York City, 1956. Take a look at that documentary, and then look at New York City today, and you tell me hustle culture is the way to go. I also have to say the people back then, they weren't hustling all that hard. Things are a little bit slower. There's a lot less traffic. There's a lot less crazy people in some type of commute, for example. People complain about commute. Well, why shouldn't they complain about the damn commute? If you are so poor and have so many things because prices are going up so much that you have to live further out from where the office is, coming in every day. That is a Herculean task. Do that 5 times a week, especially with trains that don't run on time. New York City subway is an absolute disgrace. When it came out, it was modern, it was quick, it was on time, it worked. Today, not so much. You can sit down there. I have stories to tell. I just visited New York City a couple of times. And it was on business trips that turned out to be fruitless, even though I hustled my butt off. I just didn't know the right people, apparently. But I'm not going to blame it on that. My concept wasn't really there either. It wasn't the best of plans. And in fact, the trips there were a lot more fun than I ended up doing it from a business perspective. And that's okay too. That's how life can be. How many people have gone to Paris and the thing they wanted to work out didn't work out, but they ended up in Paris and had a great time. How many people is that? So how does hustle culture square that circle? That sometimes not making it in business is probably the best thing that could happen to you. At least as far as quality and variety and immersion in good things go. So yeah, run. Don't buy the hype. And I'm telling you, have compassion. Have compassion for the people who are hustling, who bought into that value metrics, performance metrics that, in my opinion, are overdone. It's like saying, yeah, you got to do 100 push-ups a day, and if that, or no, 150 push-ups a day. You're not doing it. You're not good enough. That's sort of like the psychology behind it. That's sadistic. And so people that internalize that sadism, it's no wonder that they become sadists or masochists. They like punishing themselves, and then they like punishing others. You see sadomasochistic relationships. So my advice is to have compassion for them, because really the person that they're hurting the most is themselves. It really is. And a lot of these people, they use work as an excuse to punish themselves and others. They are. It's a psychological thing. There's no reason in the world they need 150 push-ups when in fact you could just do a motionless plank. Take a motionless plank position and do that for 5 minutes, and you'll achieve more or less the same results or better results, because your joints won't be ripped out. Your shoulders, all that's real complicated machinery. You don't notice it when you're 16 years old, but at 36, if you've been doing 150 push-ups a day, you're going to be feeling it. Your body's not going to keep up with your overachieving personality. And I say overachieving. You see, achieving is perfect. Overachieving is not perfect. It's missing. It's like taking the basketball and you throw it way over the whole damn backboard, like over the fence. That's overachieving. The goal was right there. You overachieved. That's what it looks like. Now go get the ball. Oh, the ball rolled down the parking lot, hit the little concrete bump, and then bounce right into the Hudson River. How about that? Now it's floating away as you're looking at it. That's overachievement. How does that feel? So here's something that you might have heard, but you should make it your motto: is work smarter, not harder. Absolutely. The farmer that is not using the pitchfork on every bale of hay and is economizing the stress that hits his body and uses a hydraulic machine instead, he's achieving more in a way that is not as frustrating. So choose that way. Don't choose the hard-working way necessarily. Hard work needs to be qualified. What is hard work, and why is it hard, and why is it work? Another thing I'm going to say, just for the sake of not giving up, is if you find something that has meaning for you, and you can make things meaningful if you do it in a zazen, meaningful way. It means you're aware of the meaning of your existence in the here now, no matter what you're doing. You turn it into a practice. You can imbue your life with meaning. But that meaning is the most important thing. So if you think you're doing something meaningless and you're in a bad mood and it just isn't working for you, don't keep grinding that out. Now, I'm not saying give up on necessarily the first try. That's sometimes wrong too. Like whitewater rafting, you get in that tube, it's terrifying. You hit every boulder, you just barely make it to shore. You just say, I'm done with this. But if you did that, you wouldn't have made it to the Colorado River. And that is just an epic experience. And how about this? You skillfully navigate those routes. And I'm not suggesting anyone do something that extreme, but from the aspect of visualization, it's compelling in a metaphorical way as well. Which is the other thing. This go-getting is also can lead into owing, and also blaming if you fail at something that couldn't have worked anyway. But a lot of people feel cheated and tricked. That is understandable. Which is why you're getting the memo now to take some distance from what seems to be socially hyped achievement proclamations and explanations. Achievement is a concept that one shouldn't just fly over. How many Nobel Prize winners consider that their achievement? Wasn't their life their own achievement? Wasn't it an achievement that you got to know what they got to know? Isn't that an achievement? Isn't that the real achievement? What about generosity? Like people, if you just keep working for yourself also, what are you giving back? Like, are you just a consumer? Is that how you define yourself? Or how about being a giver instead? Someone who has enough, can give some stuff away, give some time away. I've got 5 minutes. I got more than 5 minutes on my clock. I got 5 months, 5 years, 10 years, maybe, who knows. But I also don't know when I'm going to die. So if I die in the next 5 minutes, I don't want to die thinking that I need to achieve something in order to feel satisfied. Because that would be rather counterproductive, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be rather unachievable? So how about having achievable goals? And then goals that are commensurate with wisdom. How about that? Let's write that one down and then work on that type of problem instead. Because if you do that, then problems solve themselves. And what other people have for problems, you know what? That's their problems. You do need to distance yourself from social issues or whatnot, because that's agitation, agitatory propaganda. It's something that, it's like a monitor screen. Like it has something, there's something titillating about it. Human beings are titillated by the stuff. That means they're attracted to it. So they know that. We're dealing with basically malign psychologists. And so they're trying to get you involved in some type of social narrative, which may or may not be true. I mean, these people also rewrite history or remove things from the history books that don't meet their criteria of double plus goodness. Something that might criticize their self-serving theories. So you need to take a lot of things with a pinch of salt. Your informational diet, keep an eye on it and keep it, I would say, reduce it to a minimum. Start looking at things, boots on the ground. What is that? What's going on here? What are the conditions like? What is the proposal on offer? Does it make sense for me? Yes or no? If it doesn't, don't do it. And some people might say, they just don't have the strength, they have to continue doing it. I don't subscribe to that point of view. I never have, and I never will promote masochism as a worthy lifestyle. And I don't care if other people are doing it to you or you're doing it to yourself. There's always some complicity in the matter. You're in a bad situation, it is your responsibility to get out of it. Or this is the one I love. I love seeing bad situations for what they are. And although I'm tempted to take it, I don't. I just walk away. I say, well, not good enough. And I just avoided. I just kept the door closed that could have possibly led to a hell realm. It's not starting off on the right foot, you see. So how can the next 1,000 feet really be good? Now, a lot of people will have a hopeful expectation. They'll try to get over that first impression, but sometimes your first impression is really the truest one because you're the least invested in an outcome. So you meet a person, something's off, and you let that person bounce, and then you find out later something about them that justify that opinion. That's really efficient. You should think that way towards thoughts as well. But with people, it really is the key time, because otherwise, if you get invested into an idea and you associate it with that person, then you're less inclined to dismiss them. Because you're invested, sunk cost fallacy. So, but I'm not suggesting everybody cut people that may be agitating at times. Nobody is perfect. If your expectations are that you're going to have somebody who's perfect, you're right there dooming yourself to working with that person. You need to work with people, not have extremely high expectations that are impractical and impossible. So, relationships between men and women. This is something like they're trying to bust up relationships, like the culture. And they like to get in between men and women a lot. And guess what the result of that is? The result of that is a lot of legal proceedings and a lot of regulations and a lot of impoverishment and a lot of isolation and alienation and disunity amongst the serfs. So they try to get you young, especially teenagers, straight into ideological frames that will lead to inevitable conflict. So they're already preparing a large proportion of the population to be like single mother homes, and then already preparing them to go to their regulators to find some meaning and some explanation for that. Usually that the man is the evil party, that he's just incorrigible cad, which is why they're like these incorrigible cadism stories. They like to circulate that. You're either a womanizer and a misogynist on some level. So that makes you a predator, you see. So who's the victim? The woman. So as a victim, of course, the woman must protect herself. So then who's the enemy? Well, it's the man. You protect yourself from enemies. So then on top of that, these women that are on these online dating sites, you're in a really dangerous position. First off, you're letting everybody in the world, we're talking global predators, you're opening yourself up, global predation. Second off, your taste, you're always going for the best of the bunch. It turns out to a 95-5 ratio. So 95% of the women are going with 5% of the guys. Now, how in the hell can that work? Well, if you're a sultan or something and you have a big harem, that can work. But most guys are broke. This economy has, especially because they like to have women in the workforce. So I would say workforce now is like, at least in some places, 80% women. Why? Because they just work away. They don't ask questions, they don't challenge the corporate culture, they just go along. I don't say this in a derogatory way. I find it very endearing, and I think this is how humanity has survived, because, men have, they're doing some, there's a lot of eccentric men, and eccentricity in men should be totally culturally, not just accepted, but cherished. Be thankful you have some type of diversity of opinion amongst men, and diversity of taste and professions and proclivities, because that's evolution right there. That's we didn't have a cell phone, now we have a cell phone different universe, thanks to allowing men to self-actualize and to individualize. But if you have a bunch of group frames, and this brings me back to all these damn socialist countries that let these psychological terrorists terrorize their populations for decades. They want the group to decide what morality is, and the group is politicized, and it's politicized by Leninist theoreticians, which is decapitory, which leads to the deleterious outcomes that you see in the former Soviet Union. So, but instead of totally dismissing that type of psychology, again, the West has adopted it in some forms, or it was injected in the West from the East, just in updated forms. They don't parade around with Stalinist placards. They would like to portray themselves as super, edgy, inside the inside type people, socialites and pseudo-intellectuals type of thing. So of course you want to be in with the socialites, pseudo-intellectuals. So as a businessman that's also leveraged, you're going to go along with their in some type of virological laboratory of the mind type schemes, because they told you it's the future of the West. It's inevitable. The West will become like this because all these other authoritarian regimes are going to become number one. Because here it's just everything's wrecked, everything's just so toxic, nothing works. Well, in a way, that's projection on their part, but they're also working towards that end, even though they claim not to be. So yeah, we're dealing with deception, operations, state terrorism, state actors, all that type of stuff. Information spheres. Again, Great Wall of China, you don't think it's happening. What has Russia done? They want to isolate themselves from any type of criticism or letting people know how they're running things. They're dead set against that. Doesn't work for their business model. So again, the normal type of person that has normal ethics and values, they think, they'd rather think that they were crazy than to think that this has actually happened. But again, it happened in Eastern Europe. The Eastern Europeans, they know all about this. They're like insiders. It's like somebody that's been, jumped inside of the club like 200 times. But for Westerners, this is like, rocket science. can't be happening. Look, it's real easy. Just look who's running these networks, who's running these narratives, and where they get their dough from, their go from. Pretty easy to put the two and two together, but we don't have that culture right now. We're into celebrity gossip right now. We're into countercultural signaling right now. We're into completely debased, deranged, and misguided fashion right now. We're into crappy art right now. We're into crappy music right now. You see how that works? But of course, culture doesn't matter. Culture, that's a distraction from the real issues, like the economy not working because the culture's not working. Oh, is there a connection? Well, not for Perdugenists. No, they don't see that connection. They like having nice little neat boxes where nothing connects to the other, like them doing the same damn thing in this place as they are doing in this place, and with the same type of ridiculous activists that are presenting themselves as down home, for the people. So, sorry to tell you, people said this is the return of the evil empire. Well, this is their second launching of a major social offensive. So for all the people hunkered down in war-torn areas, God bless you. And as far as the King's holiday petition, that is certainly something, that's not a joke, that is certainly something that should be taken up at least by 5 people. Present the proposal to the King's holiday. The conditions do warrant it. And on top of that, I add that there needs to be a reconceptualization of the Lord Chancellor, as well as Lord Keeper of the Great Seal, of which there should be 2, and that's just getting started. The times are fast approaching that excellent leadership, although it's always been needed, will be needed more than in other times. So the faster this petition is formalized and put to the King, the better.